Hey there, Skullheads. I am Snags.
And I'm Ol Silky.
And we are talking about Aerosmith today.
The boys from Boston.
That's right.
Um,
The real Aerosmith.
yeah,
1970s, early 80s Aerosmith.
yeah, we're gonna stop at that first Geffen album.
Well, that's when they got abducted by a UFO and replaced by Bon Jovi. So,
Well, the drugs had taken its toll, and they relied on everyone else. Their
yeah, well,
what
it,
do you
it's
call it?
it's a very documented pattern among a lot of groups that once they stop taking the drugs, the music just goes to shit.
Well,
So,
but they took too many drugs. They had no longer had their uh, confidence, and they just relied on everyone
yeah,
else.
it's about
And I
it's
tell you,
about the
it's a
they got
lot
us.
easier to let somebody else write music than you can just come in and you know it's shit, but
Yeah,
it's
but I'm just saying you're right. Like too many drugs can make a band sound like shit, and not enough drugs can do the same thing. It's about taking the right amount of drugs. All these bands peaked when they were just getting into drugs, and then they had to do all this great shit, and then they
well
career crashes and they get
look
sober and come
look at
back and they make crappy music.
Keith Richards. He kept it right at the
Oh yeah,
right amount, and he's
yeah.
still going.
His
It's
whole
amazing.
thing, and I would not recommend this at home, boys and girls, but he
No.
never injected heroin into his veins. He always injected it into the muscle tissue. So it was a slow, the buzz would come on slow and steady, and he wouldn't crash and burn. So
That's some creepy shit, man.
I wouldn't inject or recommend heroin, but I'm just saying, Keith, when he was taking just the right amount of drugs, he was doing Exile on Main Street.
Yeah, that's some
Cuts way
creepy
back and
shit,
he's
though.
doing dirty work.
That's some creepy shit. um
Now we're
anyway
gonna get in trouble because he was recommending injecting heroin, which I
oh
wasn't.
Jesus.
It was a joke, but it is a true story.
um
All right, go ahead and change the subject. I can tell you're dying to.
well, let's talk about Aerosmith. So
Yeah,
they
let's do.
formed in Boston, 1970. Steven Tyler had recorded 45 with his band Chain Reaction. So as
I
he's
think it was the
cruised,
Stranger, wasn't it? The Strangers.
no,
Uh, it was
Chain
according to
Reaction.
that book I'm listening to by Joe Perry. He was in a band called the Strangers that did a single.
Well, he
But
did a single with Chain
anyways,
Reaction
doesn't
called
matter. He
"When
was
I
in
Needed
he
You." It was called "When I Needed You."
Steven Tallarico, as he was called.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Um,
Steven Tallarico, as he was called, he had a lot of bands, and one of them was
yeah.
called the Strangers, and I guess another one was called Chain Reaction.
Okay. So Chain Reaction, he had a 45 with them. So when he was strutting around town where these guys were all crossing paths, he had some celebrity with them. They really were like, oh man, there goes Steven Tyler. Um, so Joe Perry and Tom Hamilton um, were in a band called the Jam Band, and they, like I said, they would continue to cross paths with Steven Tyler. Um, Joey Kramer coming up, he had a very controlling father, which I read his book Hit Hard, and it brought to mind KK Downing's childhood. Very domineering father. Um, he just seemed to always be in trouble and
Mm.
constantly getting abuse from his dad, either verbally or physically. And this would kind of shape who Joey Kramer would become, where he sought kind of father figures from other people in his life. Um, so Steven Tyler was a drummer, and when they formed Aerosmith, he wanted to step out and be in the front as a singer, and so that allows Joey Kramer to be the drummer. And he had been drumming So, it wasn't like he had to do something different, but Kramer would constantly seek Steven Tyler's acceptance, chase after.
Steven Tyler was a badass drummer. He was a singing drummer in these bands, so he's playing this just badass drums and singing. And Joey Kramer was playing with R&B groups, so he had a lot of funk soul, just dripping from his drum licks. So it was a good match for Aerosmith.
Yeah, Kramer was in a little R&B band doing drugs, keeping up with them, and at one point, he ends up almost ODing in the hospital. Actually, he caught jaundice or syphilis or some shit from these drugs.
Those are two totally different things.
Completely, he caught something that was really bad.
Right.
Ends up in the hospital, and he was still suffering from that when he moved in with Aerosmith. So he had to be sober, and it was a real struggle. In 1970, everyone's getting high, and he's got to finish out this medication that he was on. From, I think it was jaundice. I don't know. I probably have it completely backwards, but he was very sick when they moved into 1325 Commonwealth Avenue, famous, first apartment that they would all move into. Similar to when they finally glorify us and they go and track that house down on Courtney.
Sink or swim.
Yeah. But so the famous story is that Tom Hamilton and Joe Perry were going to move to Boston and get a band together. So Joey Kramer jumps at the chance to do that. Steven Tyler had a band, Chain Reaction, and the jam band. They played together at some gig, and the jam band does a song called Rattlesnake Shake. That's a Fleetwood Mac song. And when Tyler saw them do that, he was like, oh my God, we should get both these bands together. And so he pitched that to them. Hey, I'll sing for your band. But I got to be out front. I don't want to be the drummer anymore. And they brought Ray Tabano along, and he was a rhythm guitar player. But Tabano had this leather shop with his wife, so he was kind of not fully committed. He was doing this hippie leather shop thing. It was 1970. So Tabano doesn't last very long, and they get Brad Whitford. Now, apart from a few years in the 80s, that lineup, Tom Hamilton, Joey Kramer, Joe Perry, Brad Whitford, and Steven Tyler, they have stayed the same the entire run, apart from when Joe Perry left in 1980 and Brad Whitford. But
so they brought in Jimmy Crespo and Rick Dufay during the Rockin' a Hard Place recordings.
Yeah. And they maintained a decent friendship, even though they had parted ways when Perry came back.
Whitford joined the Joe Perry project, didn't he? Basically.
Yeah. So when they left, we're getting way ahead, but in Rockin' a Hard Place era, when they left, Whitford got with Whitford St. Holmes, Derek St. Holmes of
Ted Nugent's singer.
They did that album, and then St. Holmes wants to go back to Ted Nugent, and so he was like, "Well, shit, Aerosmith's done. I'll jump on the tour with Joe Perry." So that's what Whitford did. But So they move in together in 1970. They start rehearsing, writing songs. There's a great story where Tom Hamilton had the room that was the only room that the piano could fit in. And so Tom Hamilton talks about waking up in the morning, being awakened in the morning by Steven Tyler at the piano, working out that opening intro to Dream On, like all the time. And Hamilton says when he looks back, he doesn't really mind because that song made them who they are, so.
Yeah, Steven Tyler was a perfectionist. He would work and rework shit to death. And Joe Perry was a spontaneous guy. He just let the riffs flow. So it was an interesting dynamic between those two cats.
Yeah. I could see being in a band, you want to just let's jam and see where this song goes. And Tyler would just nitpick and it had to be really frustrating.
Yeah, but I think the creative tension there forged some really good shit. I'm sure a lot of these songs are better because Tyler insisted on, well, let's add a bridge, let's do this, let's do that.
Yeah.
And they rock so fiercely because Joe Perry would just fucking intuitively let these riffs just flow.
And Aerosmith's timeline, it's like, hey, we're gonna move down to Boston and get a band together, and they rehearse, they write some songs, they sign a promotion deal with Frank Connolly, who then secures a management deal with Krebs and Lieber in 72, and then 73 their first album's out. So it almost looks easy.
Frank Connolly was an interesting cat. He was kind of like in Wayne's World, where they sign a contract with Mr. Big, like their band. He was the Mr. Big. He was this semi-mob connected guy who took a shine to them, and he had promoted a lot of famous musicians in the late 60s. And he heard them, and just this guy that was managing a theater he owned, they were renting it to rehearse in, and he hears them. He's like, holy shit, Frank Connolly's got to hear these guys. So they do a full concert, and the only people in the audience are the assistant and Frank Connolly. They just see a cigar out in the middle of and they just gave it their all, and he was blown away. And he was a very cultured guy. So like in this book, Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith by Joe Perry, he's quoting Frank Connolly all the time because Frank Connolly was like a father figure to him, and he spoke very poetically, and he taught him about culture and life and how to smoke a refined cigar and all this stuff. It's like this cultural mentor is an interesting, eccentric cat. When they do the movie of the history of Aerosmith, which they really should do, that's going to be an interesting character to watch.
If they expand, they would. It would be a great movie if they concentrate more on the very beginning.
Yeah,
and then maybe a little bit on just the golden years, and then
they die in a plane crash.
Sure, and they almost did, but we'll get to that one. So the first album comes out, and that's just a classic record. I love the cover with the sky behind them. They're all, so young on that cover. But, you look back on like interviews and stuff, and
they don't like the cover or the record.
They don't like, And Tyler talks about how he sang like he had a frog in his throat, like this nervous kind of Kermit the Frog impersonation.
Well,
except for Dream On.
Yeah, they basically they had this great live vibe because they gigged everywhere. Frank Connolly was just getting them gigs everywhere, and he's buying them steak dinners and bailing them out of jail, keeping them financially on track, paying their rent, getting them gigs everywhere. And so they were like, they played in the Catskills and dinner theaters and fucking shit kicker bars, wherever they could play. And so they had this unleashed live sound that was grassroots, word of mouth was spreading. And they get in the studio and the producer saying, okay, we're going to lay down the drum track. Then we're going to lay down the bass track. Then we're going to lay down the first guitar. And it's just, in their mind, it was too procedural the way they recorded that album. It didn't capture their live vibe. But I mean, Mama Ken, Dream On, Walking the Dog. There's some classic shit on here.
Yeah. Moving Out. I was like that one. It was as if they're heading to Boston, But yeah, I like that first album.
I like it too. But I can see it's like when Motorhead, they had a terrible time recording Iron Fist, so none of them liked it. And Iron Fist is one of the top 50 best albums ever recorded in the history of the planet, and one of the best Motorhead albums, probably top 6.
Yeah, it's a good one.
When you have this memory of you didn't like your experience of recording it, I'm sure it affects your perception of it.
Totally. So they would release Dream On as a single, and it didn't do well initially. I think when it was reissued in 75, that's when it really
they added strings to it. The record company added strings to it, which pissed off. They added some kind of extra production, according to Joe Perry. I think it was strings or some extra orchestral, some enhancements without consulting the band. And at first they were pissed off, and then it shot up the charts, and they were like, okay, I guess we're okay with that.
Yeah. One Way Street was the centerpiece on that first album. Love that song. And then Mama Ken is just incredible.
Yeah, that's a classic. That's that's essential classic Aerosmith right there.
Yeah. And then so they're just touring, and they were relentless on the road. They went they played anywhere, like you said. They did gymnasiums, high school dances, anywhere they could play, and they just slowly built this Blue Army, as they call it, referring to all the blue jean jackets and stuff. But
the thing I like about Aerosmith is they really did appreciate the funk. They covered Mother Popcorn, James Brown, all the time, and they cover Rufus Thomas on this first one. One of my favorite R&B / funk cats. Walking the Dog, great tune.
Great one. Yeah,
so
I had.
They're all about the blues.
Rufus Thomas doing that.
Yeah, they're all about the blues, but they're also all about the R&B and the funk, which I like. You can just hear it in their riffs.
One quote when I was reading that Joe Perry book, he talks about this would have been in the 90s when they're meeting all these young baby bands, is what he called them. Skid Row and some of these guys, and they're like, oh my God, it's Joe Perry, dude. We gotta get high together. And he's just like, man, I'm sober. And there was a line where he says he could tell that these kids had never dropped a needle on a John Lee Hooker record.
Yeah.
And it was just such a profound way to mention that they had no idea where the music they were playing, where it went back to,
Yep.
Just rootless, soulless people.
You mean Youth Gone Wild isn't a masterpiece? Like,
just that they don't even know where they're, who they're emulating is.
Yeah. That was Sebastian Bach specifically he was talking about, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
But that was just amazing. I hate to crash too much on Sebastian because he is a huge Kiss fan. And
I'm sure he's a nice guy. Sammy Hagar's a nice guy too. But that doesn't mean they have good taste in
but Sebastian's interviews, he does have some music knowledge. Maybe not at that time, but anyway, so they 74, they're just bigger and better. They get in. I think they get a little more relaxed with Get Your Wings, and that is a just each album's better than the last one.
Same Old Song and Dance, Lord of the Thighs, SOS, Train Kept a Rollin' cover, which
love
they love the Yardbirds and Zeppelin, and so they did their own version of that. There's apparently when they were on tour at one point when they were just huge, I think it was the Rocks tour, Jeff Beck was opening for them, which Joe Perry thought was just ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
It was
Beck was doing Wired, I think.
Yeah. Joe Perry was like this. He wasn't opening for us. We were simply following a legend onto the stage, and they get him to come out and jam Train Kept a Rolling with him, which I would love to have been there for that.
Could you imagine?
Aerosmith in their prime with Jeff Beck jamming that song.
Or just being on stage playing and look over and it's the guy that wrote the riff, you know.
Yeah. Well, he didn't write it. That's a cover song.
Yeah,
but he popularized the riff. Yeah.
They made that riff it's totally different on guitar.
Yeah. And then Seasons of Wither. I mean, it's just a classic album.
Pandora's Box. Seasons of Wither is just filthy. I love that.
Apparently, Joe Perry.
It's a ballad, but it's so good.
I know, but it's a wicked ballad.
Yeah.
As they say in Boston, that was wicked good. Joe Perry didn't like this album either. He's like, we still didn't capture our live sound.
Really?
Yeah, it's a perfectionist.
Yeah. And then, they're probably the one that their second greatest record ever, Toys in the Attic, comes out 75. By this point, Aerosmith had opened. They had toured with Kiss. They'd toured with Rush. They'd been paired up all over the place. Toys in the Attic would see them like really jump even further towards domination in the 70s.
One thing that I didn't realize, but kind of makes sense since they were mixed up in that whole Northeastern scene in the early 70s, is they're really good friends with the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
Oh, we got an announcement here.
Check out snagsandsilky.com. We got stuff. We got Funko Pops. We got shirts. We got sweaters. We got
mugs,
stickers,
T-shirts,
nuclear missiles.
Aerosmith rocks.
Aerosmith rock.
All right.
Sorry if you're listening.
So they and if you think about it, they're kind of similar bands, both very influenced by the Stones, both compared to the Stones early on in their careers. And they toured with them early on. They toured with the New York Dolls as the New York Dolls were disintegrating, so they got to see that meltdown in real time. And then Joe Perry stayed friends with David Johansen for years after that. And he bought one of what's his name's? Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Because we're recording a podcast. Guitar player for the New York Dolls.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Because
I would tell you Johnny
instantly.
Thunders. Johnny Thunders. So
Johnny Thunders.
Yeah, he bought one of Johnny Thunders' Les Pauls. I'm sure Johnny needed some money for heroin. That connection was kind of surprising to me, because then the New York Dolls are heralded as the founders of punk rock in the long run, although they really did influence the hair metal scene in LA more than is acknowledged.
It's funny as you go along and we do some of these bios on different bands, just how many bands are almost cookie cutter or, definitely owe a lot to the New York Dolls.
The whole LA scene.
It's incredible.
Blackie Lawless left the New York Dolls. He was their bass player at the very end, and went to LA and formed, what was it, London?
London,
which Nikki Sixx was in briefly. I mean, that whole scene came directly from the New York Dolls, but I just thought that connection was kind of interesting as well. And they were friends, really good friends with Kiss. They actually liked Kiss. They liked their music. They appreciated the whole theatrical thing.
Yeah. And even back when they were just doing the theater, rehearsing in that theater, I think given a stage like that, and you're able to get comfortable, even though there's no crowd there, you're comfortable with each other on where you stand there, I'll stand. It's not a sudden culture shock when you're used to standing so close and suddenly you got a whole stage. Like they were rehearsing right at the beginning with enough room to really develop a stage presence,
Yeah.
So
Toys in the Attic, though, I mean, this is the one where Joe Perry feels like it finally captured their live sound. Walk This Way was inspired by the Meters, a great funk band, legendary funk band. He said he was trying to come up with a riff that sounded like the Meters, and they were at a sound check, I think he said in Hawaii or something. And he told Joey Kramer, he's like, give me one of them funk beats. And then he just starts whipping his fingers around on the fretboard, trying to come up with something that he thought sounded like the Meters, but with some added rock power behind it.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. And then you tell the story about where the title came from.
The lyrics, they're back in New York, I believe, writing, and they're in the studio, and they're all going to go see Young Frankenstein. And so they go and they come back and they're all just dying. The bit where Marty Feldman says, walk this way. No, this way, like this. And goes up the steps. And so they just were dying laughing at that. And that's when Tyler wrote that song.
Yeah, I think Tom Hamilton suggested you should call the song "Walk This Way," and Steven Tyler he'd had a writer's block all evening. He's like,
right.
Give me a second, and he runs off and just wrote the lyrics. And David Johansen said that was the nastiest song he'd ever heard on the radio because it's just full of like really, really hardcore double entendre stuff,
And they do a Bull Moose Jackson cover of Big 10-inch Record to close out side one. And what's great is he says people always thought he says suck on my Big 10-inch, but he's saying accept my Big 10-inch.
Oh, really? I always thought it was suck too.
Yeah. Yeah. He's saying accept on my Big 10. Side 2, Sweet Emotion, Round and Round is a great fucking tune. And then another ballad, which Tyler would co-write this with Don Solomon. I'm not sure who that is. But You See Me Crying. And what's funny is years and years later, that song would be on and Tyler would be like, who is that? And the rest of the band's like, that's you. Like he was so stoned at the time. This was in the 90s when they were rehabbing every other week and shit.
Right.
He didn't even know that song, like that far removed from his synapses, but Toys in the Attic would just like skyrocket them. They're suddenly, and here's Jack Douglas, a huge, I think a huge component in making them sound as good as they did. He was also with them on Get Your Wings, but Jack Douglas was.
Oh yeah, he was their George Martin basically. He's on all his shit.
Yeah, definitely the next 3 albums, I believe, from Get Your Wings to Rocks. But so when Rocks came out,
this has Sweet Emotion on it as well.
Yeah. When Rocks came out, they were filling arenas.
Oh yeah.
And if you listen to Joe Perry, this was their last good album, which is kind of a bit limiting if you think 76.
He thinks they had 2 good albums, basically.
Yeah. But this is definitely a flawless record. Every song, all the way. I mean, you rattle off all 9 songs on this thing. And again, they close with a big, over the top ballad is becoming the, they, close out each record with another ballad. But Lick and a Promise, Get the Let Out. These are all just filthy. And
Sick as a Dog, Last Child, Back in the Saddle.
Yeah. Just phenomenal. And Tyler's lyrics were just so chock full of double meanings and innuendos, and just the way he put a song together lyrically, it just became amazing to figure out the next line. When I was getting into Aerosmith at a young age, I was always obsessed with what he was saying, but Rocks would be kind of the end of the honeymoon phase. By the time Draw the Line came out, they were no longer musicians who dabbled in drugs. They were drug addicts who dabbled in music. It just was not the same at all.
Draw the Line is a good tune.
Yeah.
Bright
Kings
Light
and Queens. That's huge.
Bright Light Fright was inspired by the punk movement.
Joe Perry sings that one.
Milk Cow Blues. Now the Kinks do a killer version of Milk Cow Blues.
That's an old Elvis Presley tune. Yeah. Well, Kokomo Arnold. But Presley covered that. But there's like just some great lyric, Critical Mass. I Want to Know Why. These are great lyrics. And for some reason, they all went out to this farm and they were going to record this album. And it was just drugs and drugs and drugs. At one point, Steven Tyler and Joey Kramer are laying on the ground because they're so fucking stoned, and they're shooting all these guns. And it's amazing nobody shot themselves or someone else. But there's a famous story around possibly the Night in the Ruts tour in 79, where Joe Perry's girlfriend or possibly wife at the time, Alyssa, threw milk on Tom Hamilton's wife, Teresa, and in the ensuing girl fight, the guys broke everything up, and Joe Perry left, and that was really the last time he would see them for years. So the band literally broke up over spilt milk.
Yeah, well, I mean, they didn't completely break up. They just, a couple of essential guys ended up leaving. But I thought their cover of Walking in the Sand was actually really fucking good.
Yeah, I think the record label put out Live Bootleg just to give them a fucking break, try to get them back on track. They were just touring constantly, and the drugs and the touring and the drugs was really taking its toll.
But he leaves like midway through the recording of Night in the Ruts.
Night in the Ruts, yeah. But let's see. I was looking at the songs on here. In line with I Want to Know Why, and some of those songs that really talk about just being in the band. No Surprise opens up, and that has a lot of the same stuff. Cheesecake and 3 Mile Smile and Reefer Head Woman were older songs that they had played before. A lot of slide guitar, bluesy stuff. Really good jamming shit on here. Bone to Bone, Coney Island, Whitefish Boy. They do an old Yardbirds song, Think About It, which was right at the end where Jimmy Page was basically starting to get full control and everyone leaving. And then, we all know what the new Yardbirds turned into.
Yeah.
But, and then Mia is a tune about Steven Tyler's first daughter, Mia. But Night in the Ruts, I've got the Night in the Ruts t-shirt that on the back they've crossed out the N and the R and switched them. So it's right in the nuts.
I remember going to summer camp in like 1980 and seeing kids wearing those t-shirts.
Yeah, that was epic.
It's a big deal back then, Oh,
yeah,
right in the nuts.
Right in the nuts. It was hilarious. So for the 40th anniversary of Night in the Ruts, they reissued that same T-shirt, and I snatched it up because I always wanted to get that shirt. Good stuff. So 79, Joe Perry leaves and forms the Joe Perry Project, a whole back to the roots kind of vibe. Perry just has such a swagger with his guitar playing.
You got to check out our interview with Cowboy Mock Bell, who was the singer for the Joe Perry Project. Check out that Cowboy Mock Bell episode. It's fucking entertaining as hell. He's got some stories.
He does. And that was it's such an honor to have him on our show. He was the singer on the third record. But each Joe Perry Project record would have a different singer, which I think kind of limited the growth of the band. You get into one singer and then they switch. It can derail the momentum.
Yeah. It's interesting because he sang, Joe Perry himself sang in the jam band. He was a guitar player singer and sang on the song Combination. He can sing. Probably not as badass as some of these singers he has, but he's got Joe Perry Project back together right now with Chris Robinson.
So, they're coming August 13th down here. It would be amazing to go see Joe Perry like that, and just and again, as these breaks in with Aerosmith come up later, like after the clones came down and took over the alien abduction.
Yeah, they were replaced by Bon Jovi. Yeah.
They would get everything together, and Steven Tyler just wouldn't write, and so they're like, "Well, dude, you gotta," Perry would just get frustrated. Well, fuck this, and he'll just go get the project back up, and write 10 songs and just do them, and no delay, and let's go.
Well, this I do remember when this album Rockin' a Hard Place came out, and basically Steven Tyler's co-writing everything with Jimmy Crespo, and I do remember the song Lightning Strikes being on the radio for a little while.
And that had a cool video, but they're all greased up like 50s West Side Story kind of rumble, thing. Jailbait, I love that song. And Bitches Brew's good. Cry Me a River is an old like Julie London chick, one of these torch singers, an old jazzy tune. Surprising that they would pull that off, but that's how talented they were. That you give them anything and they'll make it happen. And then Push Comes to Shove is a great tune. Side 2 doesn't really jump out. Rockin' a Hard Place and Push Comes to Shove were really good. But for the time, you know, this was just the next Aerosmith album, you know.
Yep.
And then by 82, well, what we missed out in 1978, Kiss turned down the opportunity to be the bad guy band in the Sgt. Pepper movie that was just panned by everyone in the world. And you figure in 1978, the Bee Gees were pretty huge. So on paper, the chance to work with George Martin and do a movie glorifying the songs of Sgt. Pepper, on paper, that sounds like a great idea. And then the Bee Gees were at the top of their game in 78. Disco was huge.
I've known some pretty serious music people who are like, don't underestimate the Bee Gees. They were geniuses. And I just can't.
No.
I can't do it, man. I can't go there.
I'll sit down and discuss vocal harmonizing about the Beach Boys. And that's as close as I'll get.
Beach Boys were geniuses. We will do a Beach Boys episode.
Yeah. But just that vocal harmonizing, because that's what people are doing.
And the songwriting.
They're praising the Bee Gees. They're talking about how the vocal harmonizing.
Sure, yeah, whatever. These are like at least two really serious music people I've run across. So I don't know. The Bee Gees they were geniuses.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But so on paper it looked good, and then they do this movie and it just pans. Steve Martin was in it. I remember the movie.
I've never seen it. Oh,
well, Steve Martin, it's worth seeing just for Steve Martin's bit as Maxwell Silverhammer and
now and then, their cover of Come Together, I think, is fucking badass.
And they performed
totally
it in the movie. So
it totally fits Aerosmith too. I mean, the Beatles wrote an Aerosmith song before Aerosmith was around. And that song fits them like a glove, man.
Aerosmith covers Helter Skelter too, which is tremendous. That's another great. I love when Aerosmith does the Yardbirds, the Beatles. You can tell it's just an honest nod to their roots, you know.
Yeah, their bands would cover the Beatles, the bands they were in before Aerosmith, so they knew that they knew those songs. The other thing is, Kiss was busy recording. The reason in 1978, I'm sure they didn't do the Sgt. Pepper movie is because they were filming the masterpiece Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park.
Yeah.
But
they toyed with it because they were going to do Phantom of the Park for TV with the idea that all the kids would watch it, the parents would be in the room watching it, and then they were going to do a movie in 79 or 80, and it was going to just draw billions of people to the theater.
Yeah, it was going to be called The Elder. They recorded a soundtrack for it.
If you listen to Gene, it was going to be
massive,
game changer, you know.
Yeah.
Always selling the product. But so Aerosmith decides to be the bad guy band, and they're up on this riser, and in the movie the riser goes up, and Joe Perry talks about how they were like, good God, if somebody fell off of this, because they were like way up in the air is what I remember. But that was really kind of, you know, they do come together, and they just weren't speaking. They were, you know, the drugs had really taken the toll by this point, and it's a damn shame that they couldn't just hit pause for a second. And then in Joe Perry's book, he talks about, you know, the work ethic was not there, but they would take family vacations, hundreds and hundreds of little vacations, and Steven Tyler's kids playing with Joe Perry's kids, doing cookouts and all that. And it was, you know, Steve and Joe, and then the irrelevant three. as what they called each other. Tom Hamilton, Joey Kramer, and Brad Whitford. And Brad Whitford played just as much lead guitar solos. If you compare Downing and Tipton, they went back and forth. They were both lead guitar players.
Brad Whitford was actually more technically trained than Joe Perry. He knew more music theory and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The thing about
I think Joe Perry just had the swagger and the bare chested.
Well, he also was a riff machine. He was like Tony Iommi. He was a riff machine.
Yeah.
You can have all the technical training in the world, but the guy coming up with the juiciest riffs is going to be the main cat. The other thing is,
I think that's why Glenn Tipton, got his way. Like this is a good riff. Shut up.
The other thing is, though, if you look at the songwriting credits for the band they're most modeled after, which is the Stones, 99% of it says Jagger Richards. If you look at the songwriting credits for Aerosmith, everybody's pitching in. Most of these albums, Joey Kramer sometimes has a credit. Hamilton and Whitford always have a credit on some song or another.
Even Jack Douglas has his name on a bunch of.
They're all pitching in.
Yeah.
It's not like every song is Tyler Perry.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the filmmaker Tyler Perry.
Right. That's funny. No, but you say all that, but like you go, like I in the Clone years, you still would go see them play live because it was so fun to go see Aerosmith. And I worked at Tower Records, so we would get really good seats and you'd see all the hotties. And, it was still a time where you went to every show that came along. It's what we did. And so I caught Aerosmith all through those Geffen years. And I met them on the Get a Grip tour. And it was funny. We road tripped up to North Carolina at the Starwood. And it's much like Lakewood in Atlanta. Same kind of setup. Probably Coca-Cola.
The Summer Shed tours is what they were called. Yeah.
And so they, we're waiting to get in. We got our will call backstage. We go in and there's a guy outside at the window like, I got to see Joey Kramer. It's my friend Joey. What do you mean I'm not on the list? And we're cracking up like, yeah, okay, buddy. And I remember going in and telling Joey Kramer, there's a guy out there that says he knows you. And Kramer's like, everybody knows me, and I just thought it was funny. But the interesting thing is all five of them were spread out to where you walked to each area to get them to sign stuff. And most of the like you could go over to Joey, Tom, and Brad, and there'd just be a little handful of people. And then where Steven and where Joe was, it was just mobbed.
Well, it's like when you and me met Kiss when Bruce Cueball and Eric Singer were the sidemen. And it was an autograph line, right? And you had Gene, and then you had Bruce Cueball and Eric Singer, and then you had Paul.
Yeah.
And we took all our records and gave them to Gene, got him to sign them. Then we walked right past Cueball and Eric Singer, didn't say jack shit, and then gave Paul the shit to sign, except fucking Cueball signed your Kiss the Originals.
No, Eric Singer signed my
Eric Singer?
The Originals.
Yeah.
And Gene took it out of his hand like,
what are you
the
doing?
hell? Which I thought that was very cool that Gene was like, why would you sign?
Well, he probably saw the look on your face.
Yeah, maybe. But I just remember Gene pulling that away and, so I've got Eric Singer's autograph on a copy of the Originals.
That's nice.
Thanks,
Eric.
You're the best.
So we're going to talk about Done with Mirrors?
Yeah. So Rockin' a Hard Place, they toured for that. By 83, Steven Tyler was so drugged out. There's stories of him down in Miami Beach, looking like a skeleton on the beach, and they were really like, he's gonna die. And they had made several attempts to get Joe to maybe come back, thinking, this would get a shot in the arm to the band, and Joe was doing his thing, but Joe was also in a horrific divorce, facing millions of dollars in divorce costs and debt and everything. So he really didn't have a choice. It was all about money, is sadly what got them all back together.
They get that question posed to them directly in The Decline and Fall of Western Civilization Part 2, the documentary. Penelope's Fear, she's like, did you guys get back together for money? And they were like, absolutely. Of course we did.
Yeah, of course we did.
And kudos to them for being honest. And they did try, to their credit, they did try to make a real Aerosmith album with Done with Mirrors. The record company hooked them up with Ted Templeman, and Ted Templeman had dropped a string of amazing hard rock masterpieces with Van Halen. So you think this is a match made in heaven. You got the power of Aerosmith with the producing vision of Ted Templeman. This is going to be fucking phenomenal. But I think they just didn't have the songwriting chops. They're coming out of this drug stupor.
And then somebody had the brilliant idea. We'll put some amazing Crespo guy on the front of the album. Nowhere on the album does it say Aerosmith. And
yeah, it does. It says Aerosmith Done with Mirrors.
No, the original album, that was like a sticker put on later. It said Done with Mirrors, and it was all backwards.
It says Aerosmith Done with Mirrors, and it's backwards.
It's backwards, and they had the Crespo guy, and it was
Crespo
like
guy.
the guy bending a spoon or whatever.
I don't remember that at all. I always remember the album cover being, it's backwards. You can see it on the wiki page. Aerosmith Done with Mirrors, but it's all backwards. It's just text. So,
yeah, so in the lettering, the guy's bending a spoon. You have to look
really closely.
Yeah, and so originally, see how it's a black background? Originally, it was more the picture.
Right.
And I believe the Aerosmith was like a sticker up in the corner.
So this is some magician guy that bends spoons?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's the whole thing was about cocaine, right?
Yeah.
The spoon, the mirrors, and they're supposedly done with mirrors, although they've relapsed. Quite a few of them have relapsed since then, but they were sober at the time.
Yeah.
It's a good. Ted Templeman in his biography says that he was going for a punk sound. He wanted a almost a New York Dolls punk, ragged kind of punk shit kicking sound, heavy on the punk. And I think that probably was a mistake because he didn't push them on the songwriting. And these are kind of they're good songs. They cover Let the Music Do the Talking, which is a good Joe Perry project song. But you look at this track listing and it's not like, oh my God, you got this, you got that. It's basic, just hard rock. It's got more integrity than anything they've recorded ever since. But the songwriting it's not quite up to par.
And this always sounded muted, much like Saint Anger's, the Metallica album, muted, almost again like a demo record, waiting to get touched up. And I think they were taking any songs they had, which is why you have these songs specifically.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, guys, we need to turn it up a notch. This is your return to the fold. And then that's why they brought in these song doctors to do that next Geffen record, Permanent Vacation, which took off, filled arena. Suddenly they're back doing
Yeah.
what they always said they would do.
I remember when Done with Mirrors was out and they're trying to play it on the radio and it just didn't catch on. And then a couple of years later, 87 Permanent Vacation comes out and it just sounds so contrived to me, you know. Get on the Track-a-Lacka or whatever, you know.
Oh, that's an old blues tune, the Hangman Jury.
Yeah.
Ragdoll was huge. Dude looks like a lady. They did the videos. John
And
Collard,
the whole You're My Angel, the overproduced ballad. I just thought the whole thing was just it's them trying to sound like classic Aerosmith, and we'll throw a power ballad in there.
Yeah,
to make sure we get some airplay.
You're exactly right, and that this was Rip Magazine. To me, this was the 90s. This was the attitude of the entire 90s. Drugs, put a shine on it and send it out, and the kids will eat it up. And to me, that's what the 90s were entirely. It was all just a big party, very two-dimensional. A lot of the 90s stuff to me is just that. And I don't know what happened. It just seemed to a lot of
there was an undercurrent in the whole grunge movement that wasn't that, but that didn't last for long. They all fucking either got killed by their conniving wives or, you know, OD'd or whatever, you know.
Or like the labels have done all the way back to Elvis, snatch you up, clean you off, and put a nice polish on it, and call it Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah, there was grunge light, Creed, and all that, but
you know. But you know, the Get a Grip, getting to meet them and seeing them, they're like, even though there's those fake songs, they were still getting up on stage and really tearing it up live. And I still saw Aerosmith even up to 9 Lives, which came out in 97. There's some really heavy shit on that. And then just 2 years later, just Push Play comes out, and it's like a Steven Tyler solo album. It never grabbed me, and I had found something on every single Aerosmith album before that, and that one just was terrible. They had like a half naked robot in the Marilyn Monroe dress blowing. It was just terrible.
Love in an Elevator, man, classic song.
But then they do a blues covers thing, Honkin' on Bobo. And what was cool about that is the CD came with a little mini harmonica that you could put on your keychain. And so I would always just, you know, and act like you were singing or something. But that was really good. That was like almost a Joe Perry insistence.
It's like the Mick and Keith dynamic, you know. The one guy wants to try to do hits, the other guy's like, can we just play some fucking blues? You know?
Yeah, and this has got some great blues shit in it, with a few Stephen and Joe Perry write The Grind, but they're doing Big Joe Williams, Baby Please Don't Go, Sonny Boy Williamson, Bo Diddley. It's all legit blues guys. So
they do some Robert Cray.
No, and they're doing the
Robert
real deal.
Cray. How are they doing legit blues if they're not doing Robert Cray?
Yeah. No Smoking Gun on this thing. It's all the real people. So that was their last one, because their legit last one from 2012, one of the worst albums I've ever heard. So.
I'm glad that they're able to make more money and stabilize their financial situations and all that. I don't, you know, but I just doesn't mean I have to listen to the records. I'm not going to.
I like that Joe Perry has gone on to team up with Alice Cooper, his Vampire Diaries,
Hollywood Vampires.
Hollywood Vampires.
Yeah.
Hollywood Vampires, some great shit on there. Johnny Depp playing with him, but Joe Perry really brings that swagger. And this new tour with Chris Robinson, another one who pretended to be somebody and then went, holy shit, I'm going to be Rod Stewart.
Yeah,
And,
just in case you guys don't know the history, we're from Atlanta, so we remember when Chris Robinson was in Mr. Crow's Garden, which was an REM jangle pop band. And Mr. Crow's Garden got a record contract, and they come out of the studio as the Black Crowes with a completely different sound because Brendan O'Brien was like, man, you got a good blues voice. Let's make you guys sound like the Faces instead of this REM crap you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was just completely
through all their music. None of this is good.
And whenever you would see Chris Robinson would come into this health food store I worked at with a big bodyguard looking around expecting everybody to mob him, and nobody gave a shit. He's just a dipshit. Yeah. But he does have a good blues voice. He's got a good voice. And didn't he, when all that shit was happening, he came into Tower Records, didn't he? And bought all the Stones. He bought all the Stones CDs so he could he could talk about who his new influences were.
He literally, and so at the time, I was slowly buying all the Stones CDs.
Right.
And whatever one I was up to, let's say it was Black and Blue, and Black and Blue had just not been in, and I kept waiting for it to show up so I could get the next one. And here comes Chris Robinson with literally every Stones album in a pot, like just a massive. That was his purchase. All 38 Stones albums.
Brendan O'Brien told me I got to brush up on the Stones for my new image.
And I'm going through ringing him up, and I'm like, motherfucker, you've got. Was there another copy of this back there? He's nope. And I'm like, you motherfucker.
Funny.
So I will give him credit though that live thing that the Crows did with Jimmy Page doing the Zeppelin covers. That's pretty good.
He's got a good voice.
It's Greek, I think it's a live thing at the Greek, something like that.
If you know the history, it's it's just at the time it was like, what happened to Mr. Crow's Garden? What's going on? But anyways.
Yeah. So that's Aerosmith pretty much. They were fantastic all the way up to Rockin' a Hard Place, and then it's spotty, very similar to Kiss's discography. Great all the way up to it becomes spotty and jumpy.
Yeah.
There's certain holes.
The 70s were a special time for music.
Yeah. Sadly, when the 80s came along, almost every single 70s band that was worth a shit that filled arenas were dead or shattered to the wind by the early to mid 80s.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's very, very interesting when you look at it that way. But
yeah.
Anyway, that's Aerosmith.
There you have it. We got more shit coming up. I got a full schedule. Stay tuned. Same bat time, same bat channel. And
deuces, kids.